Good afternoon. And unfortunately, good morning for some of you. In this time of divisiveness, in industry and our politics, I think there's one thing that we all can agree that we'd much rather be in Maui for the SAMOS conference than having to watch it in our homes and office on the webinar. But unfortunately, we can't do that, and this is definitely the next best thing. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This year marks the 10th year of operational flight safety services implemented and operated by AGI. The founding satellite operator of the Space Data Association formed to enhance the safety of flight through operational data sharing and the promotion of best practices. For the past decade, SDA members have leveraged the STM and space situational awareness services to safeguard the integrity of the space environment by leveraging the Space Data Center and what it does. Today, I'm joined by four really experts in the field, and we'll examine the operational impact the SDA and the SDC has had as access to space and the growth of on-orbit and orbital debris amplify, and the need really for robust civil space traffic management systems. The four participants today will also reflect on the evolution of flight safety and the operational challenge that it presents. So today, as I said, we really have four distinguished members that have really been at the forefront of space traffic management and space flight safety. We have Andrew Duva, Andrew is the president and founder of Providence Access Company. It's a government affairs and technology satellite consultancy. Andrew conceived the organizational structure and the legal framework and strategy of the SDA over a decade ago as an innovative, nonprofit, open organization whose mission was to ensure the safe and responsible spaceflight operations through the appropriate information sharing through all partners, and then an analysis would focus on space safety or space situational awareness. Then we'll have, following Andrew, Pascal Walthier, a Space Operations Senior Vice President at SES. Pascal joined SES back in 1990, and his role is in the technology organization is to lead SES's operation in space operations. He will be followed by Dan Oltrogi. Dan actually wears many hats and has many titles. I can't really keep track of all of them over at AGI, but one thing I know, he's the lead policy and analysis expert for AGI's Commercial Space Operations Center, the ComSPOC, and is the director of the Space Standards and Innovation. In addition to this, Dan has led many different formations and organizations as administrator for the Space Safety Coalition. And then finally, to wrap it up, we have Kevin O'Connell, and it's a real treat to have Kevin here today. Kevin has really been leading the charge for space traffic management over at the Department of Commerce as the director of the Office of Space Commerce. He has tremendous experience in the private sector, working with RAN, in government, in the intelligence community, and I don't know if there's a better person to lead this effort at Commerce and really as a whole of government approach that Commerce will take in incorporating all the different partners. So with that, I want to turn over the comments now to Andrew, and Andrew will get us started and offer his perspective. Andrew, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you're tuning in from. And thank you, Eric. It's great to be here. And thanks to AGI and the AMOS for organizing this very interesting webinar. As Eric said, it'd be great to be in Maui, but that's not possible. So here we are. I'd like to set the stage for some of the comments that you're going to hear from Pascal and Dan. And today, the Space Data Center, which is operated by AGI for the Space Data Association, is managing space traffic characteristics for 272 GEO satellites. That's 51% of the active satellites, and 411 non-GEO satellites in the LEO and MEO orbital regimes. So 683 spacecraft. That is, how did we get here? That's a long way. So it's 10 years, but I'd like to take us back to the environment just a little bit before 10 years ago, moving up to the present and just kind of highlight some of the trends, because I think we're going to see these accelerate. And as we think about where to go from here, it's going to be important. If we look back to the pre-2007 era, we were in a bipolar mode. Cold War era, it was the US, the Soviet Union, and then Russia and China. Solo missions, essentially you could pretty much, if you were looking at space, which governments were doing, and commercial activities, although happening in space, we weren't really looking at space, we were using space situational awareness capabilities provided by the government. If it wasn't us, it was them. And there was a lot of secrecy involved. Even back then, I was working with a multinational satellite operator, and the Russians told us, hey, you know what? You've got some US satellites near yours that aren't listed anywhere, and you should be concerned. And we were concerned because we didn't know what we didn't know. And that started a dialogue with the US government, specifically with General Cartwright at the US Strategic Command, who was a great leader, immediately saw the issue and put in place workarounds for us to talk to Cheyenne Mountain about coordinating space activities, which led to the commercial and foreign entities data sharing program and the drafting of what is now well-established data sharing agreements. SES, I was working with SES at the time, actually helped write and craft the first one of those sharing agreements. There are now hundreds in place with the government, and a trend towards more openness. That's where we were, and we were in a military environment with a lot of strange things from a commercial perspective taking place in space. In 2007, we saw a Chinese ASAT test, the Fenyang 1C ASAT test, which created to this day, in 2019, 3,000 pieces of debris still active from that test. Followed in 2008 by the US demonstrating its own capability to deorbit a satellite, the USA-193 satellite, in Operation Burnt Frost. At the time, General Willie Shelton, he called for improved space situational awareness as the foundational and #1 operational need for space operations. Against this backdrop, leaders like CSSI, AGI's research arm, were putting in place programs like Socrates Geo, which was a 2008 activity where owner-operator data was put together. We took part in that, and we were so impressed that led to industry discussions about how to institutionalize and operationalize this data sharing. So in 2009, that led to, after a lot of research and effort, to the creation of the Space Data Association. And what was that all about? Well, that was about creating, again, formal mechanisms to share data among competitors, private data, creating legal remedies for recovery, and importantly, imposing for the first time ever a duty to share information. Right? In this case, it was advanced maneuvers. So only satellite operators know when they're doing their planned maneuvers, whether it's autonomously or through manual maneuver activities and planning, only they know when they plan to do maneuvers. And SDA broke new ground by making it legally required as part of being in the SDA construct to share that information in advance and deconflict any potentially hazardous situations that would result. And hazardous situations did result because in 2009, we had the infamous Iridium Cosmos collision, followed by a year later, in 2010, SDA and AGI reached agreement to build SDC 1.0, the initial space data center, which has been under continuous improvement since then. In 2010, so the US National Space Policy was released, as I was saying. It recognized the need for commercial sources of data and users and guidance for SSA and orbital tracking and near Earth orbit detection. So the foundational aspects for space traffic management. That led, and we'll hear much more about it from Pascal and Dan, in 2011 to the the creation of the Space Data Center itself, its operational capability, which brought in things like data normalization, where owner-operators would contribute information, have it into a well-understood and normalized capability, allowing a lot of pre-work to be done so that there were a crisis, everybody would already be looking at data and understanding it, and not needing to figure out, you know, how to exchange data, how to understand what other people's data look like. The U.S. continued to lead. The DoD essentially put in paper what was becoming pretty obvious from other capabilities, which was that space was congested, contested, and competitive in the National Security Space Strategy, January of 2011. The U.S. wasn't acting alone. Over the next few years, we saw emergence in Europe of the Space Surveillance and Tracking Support Framework and the EU SST activities, which have been very successful in providing additional information to European space operators about what's going on in space. The US, again, continued to press for more and more information release, and in February of 2014, they shared that they had a classified satellite activity called the Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness System, now called GSAT, which is an on-orbit series of on-orbit inspection satellites. In the intervening years, contested space became visible. The fall of 2015, we learned about Luch and LIMP thanks to the AGI ComSpot activity. We could see co-orbital location by Russian satellite next to an Intelsat satellite, which was something new to see commercially. In November of the following year, China launched its SJ-17 technology demonstrator satellite that included a stated capability of inspection of orbital debris at high altitudes with proximity operations. And just last year, our friends in Russia launched Cosmos 2542 and 2543 at the end of the year. This was a so-called nesting doll satellite, and Chris Ford from the US Department of State characterized that as, quote, what would appear to be an actual in-orbit anti-satellite weaponry. So with that backdrop, it's very important that we institutionalize data sharing. And in this period, the SDA has grown from an organization that was greeted with, well, frankly, greeted with a little bit of disbelief and disinterest by established players, speaking as, you know, government players, to a full partner. Today, as I'm sure we'll hear more about, the Space Data Association collaborates fully with the the Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base and the 18th Space Control Squadron, sharing and normalizing data ingest from many, many satellite operators into the US government system, which is still the world's leading space traffic management system by providing warnings for satellite operators to take action. We also have been working closely with Kevin O'Connell and his team to help implement the vision of Space Policy Directive 3, which was released in 2018 and we've helped to lay the groundwork, share our practice, and stand ready to continue working with the US government as we turn from data discovery and visibility into a mode of sustainability, large constellations, and commercial and civil activities in space expanding at really an exponential rate. This is all going to be necessary to get us as a global community to where we need to be. And that's where we're able to use space consistently and with confidence that we know we have enough information to operate safely and avoid creating long-lived debris, which would pose an absolutely terrible problem for continued use of space. So with that backdrop, happy to answer questions at the appropriate time, and I'll turn it back over to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate it. Your sage wisdom and also the insight that you bring from being right there from the beginning and setting the stage here. Next, I would like to turn it over to Pascal, who will give a perspective from an operator's perspective, and and I think you have some slides as well. Pascal, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Let me try to share my screen here. Do you see my screen, Eric? Hello?
I'm sorry, I see it.
Okay, great. So I'm very happy also, like Andrew, to participate to this webinar as part of this AMOS conference. What I will cover is basically the operation impact of the SDA and SDC services, and Andrew will provide more details on the SDC system itself. So one of the most significant developments over the past 10 years has been the huge increase of satellite in orbit, both in geostationary and in particular non-geostationary orbits. As well as active satellites, this increase is also observed for debris, driven primarily by approximately 10 fragmentation events per year, including several publicized catastrophic collisions and in-orbit anomaly events. Over the past decade, and with the dawning of the new space era, the number of active satellites has more than doubled, and the number is increasing rapidly year on year. For example, SpaceX has already launched this year more than 500 Starlink satellites. Tracking all these satellites will become extremely complex and call for independent repositories of accurate, reliable, and actionable data, like the Space Data Center, so-called SDC, which celebrates this year its 10 years of flight safety services. During the next 10 minutes or so, you will learn how SDA and SDC have been changing the space situation awareness, so-called SSA, during the last 10 years, and the SDA expectation for the coming 10 years. Before doing so, let me start by briefly recalling what the SDA and SDC do provide. As already mentioned by Eric and emphasized also by Andrew, the SDA has been formed in 2009, is a formal not-profit association of civil, commercial, and military spacecraft operators that supports the controlled, reliable, and efficient sharing of data that is critical to the safety and integrity of satellite operations. As already mentioned, the Space Data Association relies on the SDC system operated by AGI for flight safety data exchange and processing, and Dan will explain in more detail the SDC system. But let me summarize here who was the user of the SDC system. The SDC system provides services to about 30 global operators of spacecraft spanning all orbital regimes. The SDC system performs safety of flight analysis of about 700 spacecraft, about 400 in the LEO and MEO region, and about 270 spacecraft in the GEO arc. But back to the key question. How did the SDA and SDC change SSA? I see four main contributions of SDA. First, SDA has been providing effective conjunction assessment capabilities to a large number of operators. The SDA provided interface to JSPOC and SpaceTrax, and has been able to work with operators since its inception to pull authoritative space data, provide an interface to this, and normalize data by validating conversion into standard reference frame, timing system, units, and orbital elements. This has worked to provide actionable data to operator, which is reliable and comprehensive enough to make collision avoidance measures a reality. Second key contribution. Prior to the establishment of the SDA, data sharing was mainly done on an operator-by-operator basis, under personal agreements. The SDA has managed to foster real cooperation between members of the satellite industry, even between competitors. It's shown that it is possible to scale all and all objects and have a strong legal framework, as mentioned by Andrew. The SDA also feels the need to have a commercial solution that is independent of given nation's desire to provide a free, non-optimum service. Third key contribution. During the last 10 years, the SDA and SDC experts have demonstrated that effective SSA rely on using the best available data to manage close approaches. In fact, for active satellite, SDA and AGI demonstrated the importance of using the operator information about the maneuver plan, which could be quite complex for electric propulsion with frequent burns every day. Fourth and last contribution. As Dan will explain to you, the SDC system benefits from major experts who are closely monitoring the data quality by comparing information from different data sources. These comparisons reveal many discrepancies in SSA and operator space data products. For example, GeoOperator discovered that certain of their satellites were operated few hundredths of a degree away from their nominal longitude slot due to ranging biases. So I have briefly described how the SDA and SDC changed SSA. But the true question is, how do we achieve true long-term sustainability of space activities? Here are 4 elements of answer based on the SDA-SDC lessons learned during the last 10 years. First element, flight safety derives from the comprehensive aggregation of massive amount of observations, data, environment, statistics, risk assessment, and advanced analytics. We can expect a huge increase of the amount of information to be processed due to the following 2 key changes. First change, the new space large constellation, and second change, improved SSA sensor, an enlarged space catalog, allowing us to track smaller objects down 10 to 20 centimeters, which could cause, of course, a significant debris generating event. These 2 changes will indeed overwhelm the operator with conjunction alarm, pressed by a factor of 50, even 100. How to avoid, at least manage that situation? This can only be done by A, greatly improving SSA accuracy, completeness, timeliness, and transparency to limit alarms to those requiring an action, And B, once the SSA data is improved enough to support it, introducing new safety constructs to include, for example, autonomous SSA. Second, SDA-SDC lessons learned highlight the importance of data exchange. And I think Andrew elaborated on that already, becoming increasingly important as a number of operational spacecraft dominates the known debris population. During the last 10 years, the SDA has always championed collaboration and information sharing through its SDC system. And it is this model which continues to mitigate risk of all operators. Third element of answer is in fact an advice. Government SSA and STM initiatives should learn about the SDC system and its operational concept. In particular about SDC innate inability to crowdsource space data from spacecraft operator, merge them with accurate space debris catalog from the US Air Force. Again, Dan will probably elaborate on that also. Fourth element of answer is in fact recommendation to minimize the collision risk, in particular in the LEO region. First, deorbiting shall be enforced. Currently, the guidelines require deorbiting LEO satellites into the Earth's atmosphere within 25 years. However, only around 15 to 20% of the payloads reaching end of life in LEO attempt to comply, and only 5 to 15% are even successful. Second, it's important to launch reliable satellites. This is particularly true for the mega constellation. And third, it's essential to equip the LEO satellite or CubeSat with effective and timely collision avoidance maneuver capabilities. To conclude, let me share with you the SDA vision. Our vision is to promote and support the application of advanced SSA analytics and sensor types through commercial SSA services, crowdsourcing on a global scale, sensor agnostic data fusion in a new government SSA and STM initiatives. In particular, we want to support the US Department of Commerce initiative to provide space traffic coordination and management services, as well as other government initiatives like the European Space Surveillance and Tracking System, the USST mentioned by Andrew. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pascal. That was a great overview of what SDA and SDC is doing. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Oltrogi, But before I do that, I just want to encourage everyone that if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the box. And then after Kevin concludes his remarks, we'll address those questions from the audience. So with that, Dan, I think you have some slides, and I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Great. Okay, yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here addressing all these fine people. I also would rather be in Amos, but such as it is. I'm Dan Olchargy. I'm the program manager for the Space Data Center, or SDC as we call it, which AGI and the Commercial Space Operations Center operate for the Space Data Association. In my view, this 10-year anniversary of SDC operations is truly a remarkable accomplishment, and I'd like to take a moment to give you an overview of the SDC and share some of the noteworthy achievements of the SDC over these 10 years. To understand the context of the Space Data Center and space industry initiatives for safety of flight and crowdsourcing of space data, I think it's important to look back to when the Celestrak Space Data Portal began providing services way back in 1985. The Celestrak site has supported since over 15 million interactive and literally billions of machine-to-machine sessions free of charge since its inception. Celestrak serves as a focal point for space data creation, processing, and distribution. And safety of flight services began with the Socrates, or Satellite Orbital Conjunction Reports, assessing threatening encounters in space, long acronym, tool in 2004. I see Jim Cooper is on as an audience member here. He likes to pronounce this Socrates, but I've asked him several times what university he hails from, and he declines to answer that. Socrates was fed by the first ever global crowdsourcing of space data. At first, we used two-line element sets for everything. But then in 2008, this free of charge flight safety tool was further enhanced to also incorporate operator ephemerides, which incorporated planned maneuvers. And it was, as Pascal and Andrew mentioned, it was the success of these tools in addressing perceived gaps in flight safety services, which sparked the formation of the Space Data Association then in 2009. Now, today's cloud-hosted Space Data Center that we manage for the SDA represents a fully mature commercial solution for STM that has provided approximately 4 nines of service level availability, military-grade computational security, geographic diversity, a robust legal framework that Andrew mentioned earlier, ongoing forensics and data quality monitoring, and comparative SSA analyses. And I'll talk about these in a bit. Because the SDA was originally self-formed by like-minded geosynchronous spacecraft operators, some people still think today that the SDC only addresses geo spacecraft. But as was mentioned earlier, the SDC provides flight safety assessments to 31 participating operators with 272 geosynchronous spacecraft, equating to just over 50% of all active geos, and 411 LEO and MEO spacecraft, for a total of 683 spacecraft that span all orbital regimes. Since our transition of the SDC to a cloud-hosted environment in 2014, over 3 million operator ephemerides have been uploaded, over 50,000 automated conjunction runs, and over 1,000 on-demand conjunction runs have been conducted, and 183 million conjunctions have been detected, spanning over 800 spacecraft over this period. Now, just as the Space Data Association is a unique, comprehensive framework for the legally secure participation of spacecraft operators, the SDA's Space Data Center provides a computationally secure framework for the crowdsourcing of decision quality space safety information in a single place to conduct SSA and space traffic coordination and management assessments. In this diagram, we see the inputs of spacecraft operator ephemerides, maneuver plans, and launch and early orbit trajectories at the bottom left. We see TLEs from SpaceTrack at left, SP ephemerides and conjunction data messages from the 18th Space Control Squadron at center left. These all feed both the TLE-based and SP-based conjunction assessment analyses shown in the center that the SDC provides to its operator. As depicted in the upper left, the SDC's authorized data sharing of ephemerides and maneuver plans has allowed the SDC to be one of the largest repositories and forwarding agents of operator spacecraft data. At center right, and that's a tiny box over here, you can see the SDC's conjunction data message comparisons and ongoing forensics and data quality checks that enable a running SSA dialogue with both spacecraft operators and the US government. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, gee, that flow chart was really thrilling. But what really sets the SDC apart from other commercial flight safety systems? Well, first, I would answer that when the SDC was built, there actually was no other comparable flight safety system. In fact, the only other available SSA data source at that time was the valuable heads-up notifications provided by the US government's conjunction assessment system, which indicated when further inspection and analysis was warranted. Second, I'd say that 10 years is a very long time. I joined AGI 10 years ago to support this exciting new SDC project. And I know with some chagrin that my corporate badge picture looks upon me with brighter and younger eyes than today. But 10 years is also a great fertile proving ground where techniques to ensure system robustness, availability, technical support, crowdsourcing frameworks, use of the rich operator sets of data, protection of intellectual property and proprietary data can all be put to the test. In my opinion, the SDC has done well in all of these areas. It's worth also highlighting some of the traits that the SDC has pioneered over these 10 years that are now widely recognized as baseline requirements for a capable STCM system, including the computationally and legally secure frameworks that were mentioned earlier, format agnostic or data lake ingest of operator data and verified data normalization converters, machine-to-machine interfaces, and operator phone books sufficiently granular by area of expertise, responsibility, location, and management level. Extensive use of comparative SSA and ongoing quality control to identify collision threats and resolve SSA data discrepancies. Forwarding of spacecraft operator ephemerides and planned maneuvers to the US government to enhance legacy flight safety screening services, collaboration with US Stratcom to develop the process for incorporation of SP ephemeris into safety of flight products, ongoing comparison of US government CDMs with SDC products for 26 operators spanning all orbital regimes, extensive development of space safety relevant international standards, including the orbit data message, conjunction assessment, conjunction data message, orbit lifetime, and a recently authored space traffic coordination and management standard. And finally, generation and distribution of supplemental TLEs to allow operator data to be reflected and forwarded on to other SSA services to reacquire lost spacecraft. So those are all a huge mouthful of things that we've pioneered and done over these 10 years. I think they're, again, a good foundation for future STCM processes and work. I wanted to share with you a little bit also about the SDC's automated tools and processes, and they're shown here briefly. The SDC's automated tools carefully monitor all uploads of spacecraft operator and 18 SPCS data uploads to identify and alert any irregularities. The focus of our team is to assess the precision or veracity of predictive products shown in the upper left, that's over here, cross tags and mismaneuvers to its right, timeliness, completeness, and coverage of data uploads on the bottom left. So actually these two plots here monitor that. Neighborhood watch at the center right. Extensive multi-directional consistency checks and comparative SSA products to the right, and these here do that. So these are just some of the products that we provide to not just the SDC team, but the operators to help identify threats and resolve any discrepancies we see. So in summary, the SDC is actually part of a long evolution of flight safety services to promote the safe and efficient use of space. Since inception, the SDC has pioneered many of the essential elements of an STCM system, and these are highly relevant to the diverse national and international initiatives to enhance flight safety. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, and I welcome any questions again at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. That was a great overview of what SDC's been doing and in the outreach. And having known you for those past 10 years, I can say you haven't aged a bit. So keep up the hard work. It suits you well. Speaking of hard work, now we have a good friend, and to CSF and to everyone really, but certainly to the space traffic management community, Kevin O'Connell, the director of the Office of Space Commerce. I can say without any trepidation that Kevin is probably one of the hardest working government employees, hardest working people I know in Washington, and has really been staying on the ball on this issue, on space traffic management, but so many other areas that is falling into his job jar. And he and his team over at Commerce have really been, attacking these issues and really with a high level of transparency and motivation that we haven't seen in a long time. And so I really welcome, Kevin, you coming here, your thoughts, and I appreciate all the hard work that you've contributed, not just to Commerce, but really to the nation. So with that, I'm turning it over to you, Kevin.
All right, thanks, Eric, and as always, too kind, but we do really appreciate the thoughts. Hello, everybody, and I want to thank, to start, AGI, the Space Data Association, and the AMOS organizers, Maui Economic Development Board, et cetera, for inviting us here to join you today. The preamble here and the discussion that's taken place beforehand, it clears out of the way a lot of the discussion that I was going to start with, so I won't continue to go there. We obviously have been very busy in the Office of Space Commerce over the past couple of years. Andrew walked through a longer term history, as did Dan, but obviously our relationship here began with SPD 3 in June of 2018. And so we have been moving ever since then, as I have shown you last year at AMOS. And again, I'll give you an update again this year in the formal AMOS proceedings on the roadmap and all these other things that I showed you before. But I thought I'd take a few minutes today to talk about the nature of the problem and the way that we're seeing things changing as we speak. Obviously, we're very happy. The Napa Report has driven a lot of activity over the last 5 to 6 months. I will say that if you're not familiar, the report is online, the National Academy of Public Administration, to take a look at that. And Napa concluded that the Department of Commerce was the best suited, likeliest to have the operational model to actually do the SSA STM mission that we're seeing today. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit. I won't spend more time. Maybe there are questions. Napa actually wound up speaking to over 120 people in the course of this, many in the federal government, many in industry, many other outside experts as well in the conduct of their research. And by the way, I want to say thank you to the industry participation in this, because what the industry participation did was to show Napa that the kinds of capabilities, just to the discussion we're having today about SDA, the kinds of capabilities we need to deal with this problem, to help mitigate this problem of space debris and space congestion, they're in the market today. and they're not theoretical future capabilities, they're already in the market. And I think that was impressed. That might have been one of the surprises for the Napa team, that so many different kinds of capabilities are in the market today. Let me also offer congratulations to SDA for the 10th anniversary of the SDC. I think we had the secretary up at AGI on either the exact day or right around the exact day of the 10-year anniversary. He was very impressed with what he saw up there. And I think you've seen some of his comments about that that have been written about in the press. What Napa did talk about was how to leverage the Department of Commerce's many capabilities. So the focus was on my office, the Office of Space Commerce, which has the lead role in the department. What we were really able to do was to show the diversity of capabilities across the department. The fact that we're doing space traffic management at some level within NOAA as we speak, NTIA's capabilities on radio frequency interference, NIST's capabilities, and many, many others. One of the big cross capabilities in the department that we were able to bring to bear, and I'm reflecting now back on Pascal's comments, the Department of Commerce is known as the data agency, if you will. For so many different data sets, the department is responsible for collecting unique, exotic data sets, analyzing them, curating them, and then basically providing them to the public, in some cases, specifically the weather case and the space weather case, with a public safety mission in mind. And if you paid attention to that value chain, that's very much what we were asked to do in SPD3. And so the Space Data Association, in the way that it has evolved over time, I think offers a very important vision for what we're trying to do and what we affectionately call the Open Architecture Data Repository, of course. And again, I'll give you more of an update on those details in a little bit. Let me just talk for a few minutes, and I'm sure folks will have questions. Let me talk for a few minutes about different dimensions of what the previous speakers have spoken about. One is the value of moving from a closed system of doing this to an open system. And again, I've often kidded and said that the open word in Open Architecture Data Repository is really the most important of the words. Open doesn't mean that anything will be in the architecture or the repository, I should say. But what it does mean is that there's going to be a wide range of capabilities that are in there, starting with the Defense Authoritative Catalog, but a wide range of civil and commercial capabilities that are available to inform on this problem. And so those are some of the early technical issues. And I think Space Data Association has experience with these that they're important to pay attention to as we do that. But that open system we see as being valuable in a multitude of ways. The first of which is improving conjunction analyses, which is what we're all trying to do here. But secondly, there are probably second and third order effects on new capabilities that can be created in the market that we want to pay attention to, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. Folks have already described the nature of the problem, the growing cadence of launch, the growing number of satellites in space. Dan gave an example of the international calculations or estimates, I should say, of satellite launches over the next decade. And they're extraordinary. We've never seen anything like that before. On the one hand, we want to encourage that because in those launches lie new kinds of services that will be useful here on Earth, but also on the path to sustainable activities on the moon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we want to encourage that innovation. We want to do it in a way that obviously is safe and sustainable. And so we don't agree. Every once in a while we hear that maybe we should slow down for a bit. We actually don't agree with that view. We should be sensible about how we approach this, and I think all of the efforts that were embedded in SPD3 and all of the efforts then reaffirmed by Napa, those are very, very important to getting moving and doing it now. Again, Napa used the crisis word that we all use. I have not yet met a space debris skeptic. Again, anybody that's interested in space is fully aware that this is an urgent problem that we have to deal with, and we really need to deal with it right now. There's other parts of the solution that I would mention. One is this sort of web of partnerships. Napa, I'll read one of the lines. Napa strongly recommended that the office avoid establishing a large bureaucratic structure to accomplish the STM mission and instead focus on creating a lean, modern, collaborative model that places the highest priority on DOC as a convener, coordinator, and provider of trusted SSA data. And many of those words you hear in the descriptions this morning of the SDA model. It cannot be a conventional government approach to dealing with this. Secondly, we know that commercial capabilities are really the fastest path to staying abreast of the mission, even as it changes. That's a very important dimension. It actually was an important dimension, an assumption, if you will, of SPD3. But when we look at the realities going forward as to how the space environment is going to change, this is critically important. We have to have a solution that moves at speed as the mission changes as well. Third thing that Napa really pointed to was this web of partnerships, if you will. On the government side, obviously they endorsed the Office of Space Commerce and the department as the lead agency to do this, but it really is a team sport. It's something we're going to have to do in partnership with our interagency colleagues. The relationship with DoD remains a continuous and extremely strong partnership. That's very important. Second, NASA also has been very helpful to us. I noticed in the little advertisement that ran before the session, I talked last year about 2020 being an important building block year for us, and it very much has been to the deepening of relationships with DoD and NASA and other interagency partners. And so that all of the government will be involved in doing this. On the industry side, I've talked about the importance of industry participation in this. And as I've said before, the frustration here has been the capabilities are in the market today. They're not future far off capabilities. And so we're hoping with resources to leverage those as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. We also want to do so mindful, Napa highlighted this as well, but so did SPD3. We want to do this mindful that the basic service will not compete with the emergence of what SPD3 calls the advanced services, the emergence of a commercial space safety industry. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. Pascal talked about what the early nature of the problem is, understanding how to collect massive amounts of data about the space environment, and then actually providing a coherent picture to owner-operators, not only in the way we do it today, but perhaps using other warning modes to do so, machine to machine, using artificial intelligence, things like that. And so we have an opportunity to modernize the system going forward. And frankly, that's one of the reasons that SPD3 pushed this part of the mission to commerce. Lastly, I'll stop here with the space safety industry. SPD3 tells us to be mindful of encouraging the emergence of a space safety industry. And I will tell you that we are very encouraged to see a whole new slate of organizations come forward with ideas about space safety that are beyond improving conjunction analysis. Everybody is aware that we have to do a better job of doing that. But in the face of that, companies are also talking to us at Commerce now about new space safety commercial services. That's very exciting. The parallels aren't perfect, but I've often used the example of how GPS was commercialized, to those that are old enough to remember that. The development of many, many capabilities that were developed after a decade-long investment by the US government that were then open to commercialization. I really believe that's where we're at in the SSA world. The improving the understanding piece, the conjunction analysis piece is absolutely critical, but we're seeing a wide range of industry coming forward with a new set of space safety ideas up to and including active debris removal. And so with that, I think I'll stop. I'm sure there are probably questions for the entire group, but I'm delighted to be here with you today and hope to see you again in a couple of weeks at the formal AMOS symposium. Thank you.
Evan, thank you so much, as always, for not just your leadership, but the insight that you always provide as really a true subject matter expert on these issues. And I think the takeaway from everything that you said was we're not going to slow down. We can't slow down, and this is too important. So at this time, there's a lot of questions coming in on the webinar. I have a few that I have, and I'll try to bounce over from some of my questions that I wanted to get to the bottom of, if you will. So if the other panelists wouldn't mind joining by video, because we'll probably bounce around to the four of us, the four of you guys. I wanted to start off with Andrew. Andrew, you've really been at this since the beginning in a lot of different ways. So as you consider the SDA and AGI's influence on space traffic coordination and management to date, what trends do you see looking forward, particularly, and especially as we have Kevin here, particularly from the policy and legal perspective? What do you see on the horizon there?
Okay, thanks, Eric. It's a good news, bad news story, or some challenges coming. So I think we're gonna see. So here's my predictions. Here are my predictions. Let's see how I do 10 years from now. Well, for sure, we're going to see continued emergence of smaller satellites, particularly in the non-geostationary orbit regimes. We're in the middle of that, and I don't expect that to slow down. I think from a policy perspective, legal perspective, we're going to have an expectation emerge that transparency of data sources, processing, and the resultant SSA information is available to everyone. So that's a change from today. And out of that will come a duty to share planned maneuvers and signal actions in space to others. That's not required today by any regulatory actor that I know, without some exceptions. But just in the ordinary operational course, I expect that work that we've already done in the SDA will become an absolutely established norm. On the challenges side, I think we're going to have an important space collision or two. It's just a numbers game, and there are numbers going to come up as intense use of space continues. And that's going to lead, in a very human way, to overreactions. But it's going to have a bright side to that downside, and that's going to be that sufficient resources to improve foundational SSA and STCM will result. I just think it's probably going to take a collision or two that wipes out a mission or a part of an orbital regime before we really get at the general public level the understanding of the issues that those of us involved understand so well. That's going to lead to changes in the regulatory regime and the commercial aspect. For example, I would expect to see that insurers fairly soon will exclude collision risk from their on-orbit liability policies. Right now, it's covered risk, and I expect that to disappear. Without getting too much into the legalities, space is a region that's where the actors are nation states and not commercial actors from a legal perspective. And I think we're going to see more nation states grappling with issues about liability and risk. And that is going to lead on the commercial side to more forum shopping. And that is going to lead to some anxiety from the well-established space powers and leaders about this as folks try to go elsewhere, which will open up an opportunity for launch providers who are really the guardians to space access. I expect them to develop and apply norms of behavior to emerging satellite operators. These norms will effectively be commercial regulation through contract. Of certain particularly egregious practices that we sometimes see today. And in response, I think regulation from nation states will evolve, and there will be more restrictions on the commercial use of space than there is today, but those restrictions are going to be based on experience, not on a desire to slow down commercial activities. That's what I see coming.
Great, thank you so much. That's really good insight, and I think your crystal ball has served you well over the years. Hey Dan, I have a question for you. It seems like the space data center is predicated on the construct that the Air Force and the owner-operator space data always contains the best positional knowledge for space debris and commercial spacecraft, respectfully. Over its decade of operations, has this assumption proven to be a good foundation for STC&M, or do you see operational experience? Does your operational experience lead you to suggest kind of a better course for space traffic coordination and management going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. That is, as you say, the whole thing that the SDC has been predicated on. We found, I think, over the years that this, in most cases, this has been an extremely valuable construct, that the operators do tend to have the best data on their vehicles. Debris-wise, you have government systems, which are exquisite. Then you have, now commercial SSA. One thing we found, though, overall, is that our lack of data fusion, I'd say, at the raw observational level, and then that couples with simplifying assumptions, stovepipe systems, lack of quality control sometimes, system biases, and countless other effects can degrade the accuracy of both the government and operator SSA data. And that degradation, let's say, then leads to the operators and government to need to use more conservative keep out volumes and screening thresholds than they would typically do. So that leads to situations where also operators sometimes believe that the data or that they're safe when they're not. So I'd say that this situation, coupled with the introduction of potentially 10 times more active spacecraft in the next 10 years from large constellations, and also 10x more potentially debris that we're tracking. This is stuff that's already in space, but by having better sensors and data analytics, we now have better solutions and more comprehensive catalogs. That is just not going to let our approach to date, writ large, to be sufficient. I think the answer, it seems to be, is to holistically work to improve our SSA and STCM, and provide operators with better SSA discriminators so they can focus on the real threats and not be distracted by false alarms. And this can be accomplished, in my view, again, with better analytics, but also crowdsourcing and this comprehensive data fusion and space data exchange that we need to get to. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dan. Pascal, I have one for you. As we're talking about the SDC and its 10 years, you've described a lot of contributions and lessons learned of the SDA and SDC as this decade has transpired. What is the key challenge that you see SDA will be facing in the coming years?
Thanks, Eric. Yes, as I mentioned, I think we need to improve, and I think Dan just mentioned it. We need to improve the SSA accuracy and completeness, and that will require more accurate sensor. We need to track smaller objects down to 10 to 20 centimeters. As that coupled with the launch of the large LEO constellation or CubeSat, that will increase the amount of information to be processed, and we increase the number of conjunction alerts by a factor 50 to 100. And as just mentioned by Dan, that will require the development of multi-sensor data fusion techniques, basically also risk assessment tools, advanced analytics, again, just to filter the data and to really limit alarms to those requiring an action. And this would require a significant and expensive upgrade of the SDC system. And because the satellite operators, the SDA members, are under big pressure now to reduce costs, even more with the COVID-19 business impact, the SDA members can't finance these upgrades. This is one of the main reasons why the SDA now is supporting government initiative, SSA and STM initiative, like the US Department of Commerce that Kevin explained, to provide space traffic coordination management services. I think because we can't sponsor anymore all the system upgrades which are required to manage the changes, I think, Dan and I just described.
That's great, Pascal. That's a great assessment. It kind of leads me to my next question for Kevin. How, with this 10-year experiment, if you will, an operational experiment that SDA and SDC has implemented, how do you see the Office of Commerce benefiting from their experiences over this time frame and all the things that have gone well and the challenges and what the services they're providing? And I guess, how can the public benefit from this going forward, the work that the satellite operators have done?
Sure, thanks, Eric. I think the SDA SDC experience is a very important one for us. It shows the value of a more collaborative approach to this problem, where folks are sharing their own data and getting out improved accuracy of data. And that is exactly the model that is seen in SPD3 and in all of the plans that we've got. So that it's a very important model for us to pay attention to as we do this. Again, I talked about this being a kind of a team sport, both in the U.S. government, but I didn't mention our international partners as well, like the EUSST. I've just had the pleasure of being part of the very small delegation that was in Tokyo for the 7th Comprehensive Space Dialogue with the Japanese. This is a topic they're very, very interested in as well. Now, that said, everybody on this call has identified serious technical challenges we have that we have to solve very, very quickly. The good news is that in many cases, we're drawing from, if you will, an ecosystem of technologies that are not just space focused, but also data and analytics that are really on fire right now in a good way. And we should really be able to try to pull those capabilities together very, very quickly to help mitigate this problem that we've got. So I think it's a very important example.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm going to the audience questions right now. And the first one's from Andrew Swackhammer. His question is, does the current SSA infrastructure in the SDC process, the computing power to handle the predicted increase in the information due to the increased number of satellites in the near future? I guess Dan.
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one. Yes, absolutely. Our modern systems are scalable. So, if you look at the processing load for today's catalog, we make sure we have the sufficient CPU and resources to get the analyses done in a timely manner and consistent with when the operators and the 18th Space Control Squadron data is pulled in and processed. And if we get a catalog that's 10 times bigger, then we'll just need to bring 10 times the computational resources to bear. And also, if the active satellites get 10 times bigger, we'll have to do the same. The scary part to me, though, is that our current construct for avoiding collisions is really relying on a certain ops tempo and flight dynamics staff resources and so forth. And I worry that unless we get to this data fusion of raw observations so that we can have much more accurate predictive ephemeris and positional knowledge, the flight dynamics staff are not going to be able to sift through the millions of conjunction warnings they'll be receiving. We need to get better data so that we can get rid of, let's say, false alarms that we can toss.
Okay, great. Another question is, what is the SDA's expectation to deal with the new LEO constellations? As we see a lot, these larger LEO constellations going up, Starlink and Kuiper and others. How do you handle this, and what are the expectations moving forward for these larger constellations?
I can maybe take that one. Yeah, we have tried to approach, for example, SpaceX and OneWeb. I think they have raised a lot of questions because they claim they share already a lot of information with 18 SPCS. And when discussion with them, of course, for them is a question, so what is the value added the SDA and SDC is bringing compared to other services? So we are in discussion with them. Not as advanced as you would like, but we are in discussion with them.
Okay, great. And a question, I think, Kevin, you touched on this, but will the Commerce Department be collaborating more with SDA, SDC to develop its civil STM system as required by SPD3? I guess that's maybe more of a money question and a policy question, but I wanted to ask that.
So on the money front, obviously, another thing that the Napa report highlighted was the need to provide appropriations as quickly as possible to deal with this. And so, we will look forward to working with Congress this year to identify issues and to elaborate further on some of the plans that we have. We're really looking forward to working with a wide range of commercial operators and organizations like SDA, SDC for the best practices. I think Andrew said it before. What we want to look toward is a world where we're taking best practices, even as new missions emerge, to understand how to deal with them in an SSA STM context. And that's going to require engagement with industry to do that.
Great. Well, the music to my ears is always public-private partnerships, and you guys have been out on front on that. So so I appreciate the efforts being made there. Which is the size of the SDA catalog in terms of numbers of objects with U.S. public TLE categories or an SP catalog? Does that make sense to you guys? Maybe Dan is.
Yeah, we're using the full catalog that both in TLE and in SP ephemeris format that the U.S. government makes available, and we bring that and combine that, then fuse that at the ephemeris level with all the operator spacecraft that participate in the SDA. So as those catalogs grow, we will grow with that.
Okay, and then I have another tracking or data question, but the raw tracking data held by the Air Force from around 1965 to present, could that be used to improve satellite motion models? And can this data be made available to the research community? And I'll follow up on that. It's like how much of the data that SDC uses, how much of that is available to the research community?
Well, in terms of the catalog, that we don't own that. That's a U.S. Air Force and U.S. government product. We have amassed a fair amount of that data over the years, going back to the start of the space program. But again, that's really their call in terms of whether they're interested and open to sharing data there. I know that they have had some sharing programs in the past, but again, you'd have to speak to them. Regarding the Space Data Association, I note that we are doing active research, particularly in inverse, photometry studies and algorithm development. And we, not just SDC and SDA, but also the ComSpoc have shared data, previously with a number of universities to help in their development and research. And we see that it's critical to help foster not just building new algorithms, but helping nurture them so that they become at the TRL level that's operationally relevant.
Eric, this is exactly one of the benefits that I started to mention when we talk about the difference between a closed system and an open system. In an open system, you're going to be able to have much more exploration of longer term trends. There's an example I've used recently, which is that, when I have this data in the open, with some historical depth behind it, I'm going to be able to inform, for example, the insurance industry on how risk is thought about in different orbits, different constellations, things like that. That's not possible in the current system because, as has been mentioned, that data is on the other side of the fence, if you will. Once we're able to develop that historical, accurate data set in the open, it allows for academic research, it allows for a whole host of other what I call second and third order benefits that I think are potentially very, very valuable to moving fast in helping with some of these problems.
Great. I know we're running out of time and I'm pushing it already, but I do have one question because I think it's very important and it really is based on our future. And this is for everyone. What are some of the ways that young professionals and young students can begin to get involved in the fields of SSA and a broader space sustainability? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll start. I've gone through and characterized all the elements that allow us to have a space traffic coordination and management system. And it's mind-boggling. I have papers I'm happy to share with people, but my message here is there are so many elements to this, and we need your help in all of them. That If you see something that's really of keen interest to you that's on that list, and again, it's a huge list, please dive in. We desperately need your help.
Yeah, I would second that. There's a ton of work to be done. It's interesting when I talk to different communities, even at home and abroad, oftentimes people will say, I don't have any expertise in some of the technical aspects of this. And the bottom line, Dan has just said it, is there are so many different areas which need help. You can work in the norms and best practices area. You can work in the technical area. You can work in the data management and data analytics area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for the graduate students that are out there are tremendous opportunities to make a career for yourself in this area and an academic career as well, if that's what you choose.
And I'll add as a non-technologist, let me add a technical idea here to those people who are developing systems and working in operations. When you're putting something together, use your proximity to those development activities to think about how you're going to take in and share information at the speed of machines. Because we're moving to a world where to operate successfully in this regime and to scale, we're going to have to get people out of the loop and make sure that understanding what is happening at any given time is something that is expected and shared. And a lot of system design goes into, as Kevin alluded to, something goes on the other side of the fence, it's not shared, or, well, we'll have to run a report and people have to have a meeting. That's the old way of thinking. And we are all starting to change that, but bring that up. Stomp out that old way of this is our data. It is your data, but you might have very good reasons to share it and make it available to other people.
What I would add to that is, and what I've seen firsthand, get involved. If you're a student right now, university level, look for internships and look all over for internships, because any experience is good experience. One thing from my perspective, I just had my 6-year anniversary with CSF, and as I looked at how we have grown, our organization has grown. I kind of did a quick poll, and of the almost 90 member companies that we have, 70% weren't around 12 years ago. 70%. So there's a whole new market out there, and look to those new markets and these new companies, and so there's a lot of opportunities, and also the companies that have been around with a proven track record. And I guess on that note, talking about proven track records, it's time for me to conclude. And so I really want to thank my 4 panelists, these really experts in the field, Andrew, Kevin, Dan, and Pascal. I really want to thank you for your time, for your insight and expertise, and also your leadership over the past 10 years in this field. I want to thank AGI and Amos for hosting this webinar today. I think it was incredibly informative for all the, and I want to thank all the participants that have been on for the last hour and a half. There's a lot of questions we got. I know I wasn't able to answer all of them, or our panel wasn't able to answer all of them and get to them, but I know that they will get to these questions and try to close out some of these questions that you may have. So look for an answer on that. And with that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to the brain in the sky that will be presenting one more video for the group. So with that, I thank everyone, and now to the video.